So thank you so much, Dr. Bob, for joining us today, guys. We're on this call with Dr. Bob Rakowski, clinical nutritionist, global health expert. We're talking about MS. It's a challenge that really debilitates a lot of people who struggle with this particular challenge. So if you know anyone who's had this challenge, then please tag them in this recording and reach out to them, let them know that there's some great information that you can start to adopt into your lifestyle, and maybe with the right ingredients, you will start to feel better and do better, despite what opinion you may have gotten from a medical advisor in the past. So I'm just going to go live with Dr. Bob right now. Just a little bit about Dr. Bob. For the last 30 plus years has been in clinical practice for himself. He's the head of the Natural Medical Center in Houston, Texas, clinical nutritionist, chiropractor, kinesiologist, biological terrain instructor. Actually, the first time I read that, I thought, wow, Dr. Bob enjoys the great outdoors. So I didn't actually know what that was until I dug deeper and started to do a Google search on it, but it made sense. The latter didn't. When I in my ignorance, I didn't know what that was. So you know what, the message, or I suppose the lesson in that is, you don't know what you don't know when it comes to everything in life. And nothing is more important, I believe, in this life than health. So I'm on a health mission. Dr. Bob is on a health mission. I know a lot of people who are joining us live on Zoom and maybe watching on Instagram also have a health mission to accomplish. And that's to get good information to good people so they live a great life. And I think that's a great mission in life, honestly, because the more people you help, the more you get rewarded. And that's really what we're here to share with you guys, is solutions, holistic solutions for different kinds of health challenges that you or someone in your family or in your circle may be facing at some point in their lives. So Dr. Bob is an expert in functional medicine, which means looking at root cause, not just sticking a Band-Aid on the outside and hoping for the best. So welcome to Instagram, Dr. Bob, welcome to Zoom, and welcome everyone who's joining us to these calls. Great to have you here. How is all in Houston today, Dr. Bob?
It's a beautiful day in Houston. You know, we had a national holiday yesterday, Memorial Day weekend, where we, essentially honor our fallen soldiers and God bless all their beautiful souls. And what an interesting intro. I was actually late, and that's why I took a few minutes to get set up. But the patient that I saw just before lunch, I decided to shoot a video of her, and then I'll put it on my Facebook page. But not multiple sclerosis, but a young lady who 30 years ago at age 12 was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And I think at that time, her life expectancy was somewhere like 35 years old. Well, she's 41 and in the office, and she was here with her beautiful teen twin daughters. But when I met her, I would describe her as cushionic. She had the moon face, the buffalo hump. You could look up those two characteristics for someone taking super high dose corticosteroids, which she was for her issue. And within a very short period of time, supplementing her, changing her diet, getting her body moving right, it all went into complete remission. And there it still is, nearly 30 years later, 29 years later. But we were telling a story. We actually had a press conference in our office because there was a young lady named Rachel Stout. You could look up the archives of that, who was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. And when the family took her to the hospital in Dallas, Texas, the doctor said, well, we have no choice. We need to remove her colon. And the father was a researcher, and he said, look, I've been looking into this natural medicine stuff. We'd like to try that first. And they said, absolutely not. You can't do that. They called CPS, Child Protective Services. They were going to take this child away and cut her colon out. Well, the family kidnapped her in the middle of the night, took her to Canada, of all places. And anyways, so there was a press conference going on, and one of my patients was a lobbyist for natural rights. And she said, Dr. Bob, have you ever treated a case similar to Rachel Stout's? I said, well, similar. Crohn's and ulcerative colitis are cousins, but what are you looking for? Well, we had a press conference in my office, and back then there were 4 major news stations, and I think the news was news back then. And so we had her there, Audra Gottlieb. I'm not giving away any clinical information because I shot the video of her just before this, telling her story, which is kind of fun. But here we are, 40 years later, someone who was given a death sentence, a life of misery, a life of restriction, a life of nonstop medication, but instead finding the root cause and creating a beautiful life. So can we do that with multiple sclerosis? Well, it's been done many, many, many thousands of times. And I'll encourage people to look up the story of Terry Wall, W-A-H-L, if you want to know what's possible with MS. But she spiraled with a medical approach and thrived with a functional medicine approach, and now teaches it around the world.
Yes, I remember you mentioning that last night as well on Clubhouse. I want to check out her story on that as well, because it sounds like an eye-opener for sure. But if we could just backtrack just a moment for anyone, maybe someone who's a guest here doesn't fully understand what is believed to be the root cause of MS and how does it affect the human body?
Well, Eric, there's going to be many potential causes, but one thing that I wanted to share, and I started to share it, and I found the PubMed study was, and I gave you some information that wasn't terribly accurate. There's a huge link between Epstein-Barr virus and multiple sclerosis. So they did a military study, and I think it was something like 10 million people that they had looked at. And what they found out, and I'll share this screen, even though I didn't finish making the pretty slide, but you can see the PubMed there. They found the risk of MS, multiple sclerosis, increased 32x after infection with Epstein-Barr virus. That's what EBV is, but not increased after infection with other viruses. So that's not a small gain. 32x is huge. But now, Eric, let's give you the details that I was wrong on yesterday, because I looked back and they said, well, they estimate half the population has Epstein-Barr. No, they actually estimate 95% of the population has Epstein-Barr. Wow. 95%. So, when we start looking at these viruses, they are absolutely part of where we are. So we're not going to get rid of them, but all we can do is create a strong and balanced immune system. And we'll talk about that in a moment as well. But I may share one other reference that between patients, I was not having a lot of time to look, but I'm going to do a new share. So there we have it, right? So the human body is home to an abundance of bacteria, viruses, and fungi. In fact, they make up the majority of the DNA in our body. Then they start talking about how important it is for infants to have appropriate colonization. Now that starts with birth. We know that when babies actually are born naturally, as opposed to C-section, when they pass through the female reproductive tract, they're inoculated with good flora. And if they're not, well, then there's other challenges there. Now they've found other ways that they can actually take a gauze and actually apply that to the vaginal microbiome and then just kind of wipe the baby's face with it. And that's one way to colonize. But notice what it says. If they don't colonize appropriately, it can influence health in later life, potentially promoting autoimmunity, allergies, metabolic diseases, and even cancer. Now let's look at the next line. These are three different sections of the same Science cover story, which happens to be when? May 27 of 2022. So we're not going old news. We're going hot off the press, cutting edge. If a microbial population is disrupted by antibiotics or a low fiber diet, then pathogens can gain advantage, resulting in systemic inflammatory process and infection. So pretty powerful stuff. So we know that all the things in our environment have impact. And when we honor our body, honor our microbes, we're going to be in good shape. And, later on, I'm actually going to do a PubMed and maybe even live. I want to see if there's a link between antibiotic use and autoimmunity. And here's my projection. I bet they have hundreds of studies on that, which I haven't searched it yet, but I think I will, just because I think it's an absolutely critical topic.
Actually, I was listening to a podcast earlier today on that very topic around the impact of excessive use of antibiotics, that they have saved lives. They have, diminished and reduced infections, but they've gotten to the point now where they've been overused and just decimated the human microbiome to such a degree that people are really starting to go in the other direction because of overuse. And it's just not a good strategy. I mean, it's like any medication, as you mentioned before, it's minimum usage, minimum dosage over shortest duration. And that's unfortunately not always the approach. Is there's a problem, let's dose it with antibiotics. And what kind of frustrates me is before I started to really understand what gut health was, I never knew the importance of taking a probiotic after a course of antibiotics. And as I've come to learn, it's crucial because of the exposure to infection to the gut, and different things like leaky gut syndrome and all these different things that I just simply wasn't educated on. My doctor never told me. It wasn't brought up in conversation until I brought it up, and then almost a heated argument kicked off in the office because I'm asking these questions and I'm just getting these abrupt answers of, yeah, you don't need to know about that stuff. So I changed that doctor. I haven't seen that person in quite a while.
Eric, I want to continue on this tangent for a moment, because I had new parents. When I say new parents, I mean like giving birth to a baby today, asking questions. And they said, are there any concerns with vaccines? And I said, well, maybe, so let's do a PubMed search together. So I typed in vaccine-induced autoimmunity on PubMed. And if you're looking at my screen, you'll see nearly 2,800 studies. And you'll see that they go back nearly 60 years. So we've seen this skyrocketing of across the board autoimmunity. And this begs the question, could this be related, right? And by the way, the questions they're going to ask that question within the article. Well, do we know for sure? Well, they actually do know for sure that it can do it. Now, will it do it? We don't know. But now let's go back to this real quick. Antibiotic use plus autoimmunity. Let's see if, and this is the very first time I'm typing that in. Let's see what we get. Oh my gosh. Well, I said hundreds of studies. I was wrong. We've got 4,750 going back over 60 years. So, wow, is what I can say. So you might begin to ask, wait a minute, vaccines are doing it, antibiotics are doing it. Most kids are getting a ton of those, maybe first couple of years of life. And then we go to Science, May 27, 2022. It says, if you disrupt that microbiome, and let me go back and share that again. If you disrupt that microbiome in early life, wrong share. So let's look at this again. Microbial colonization of the infant has systemic effects that may influence health later in life, potentially promoting the development of autoimmunity is the first thing they call out. And now we know why. 4,700 plus studies going back over 60 years on antibiotics, essentially being linked to the development of autoimmunity. But let's take it a step further. Allergies, metabolic diseases, of which the top is going to be diabetes and even cancer. So, wow. I hope that people are watching this are going to suddenly, step up their rate of due diligence and sharing, going, hey, maybe we ought to take a little closer look at a lot of this stuff. Beyond fascinating, really.
4,700 plus. Wow, that's quite a lot of data on that. That's shocking. When we tie it back to MS in particular, we can see perhaps most definitely vaccinations and antibiotics can lead to problems later on down the road. What other factors do you see that would connect people developing the likes of MS that you haven't listed maybe on that list so far?
Well, let's go through it. So ultimately, MS tends to have young onset. So between the ages of 20 and 40, there are certain problems that start at certain age groups. And for instance, testicular cancer in males, it's a young man's cancer, 20 to 30, if you get past that, you're probably not going to get it. MS, if you get past 40, much less probability of getting it. But how about gender? Women have 75% an estimate of all autoimmune circumstances. And when we share the medical literature, it says estrogens promote autoimmunity, whereas androgens protect against. Now, there's a problem with that because men are having way, way, way more estrogens. Why? Because increased body fat increases estrogens. Through an enzyme called aromatase, testosterone is converted into estrogens, but we're all exposed to estrogens in plastics, pesticides injected into animals. There was a interesting circumstance where a killer whale washed up on the shore, and I thought it was of the UK. And when they looked at it, they think it actually died from xenoestrogen poisoning. And they found out that how are they able to figure that after death? This killer whale was infertile. It had never given birth, and they believe it was the estrogens that destroyed the fertility. There is a genetic risk. Now, keep in mind, my mother was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. I said that the other day, and she was diagnosed who knows, almost 50 years ago. But she put it in complete remission in a year through getting her health under better control. At 81, takes 0 medications. So think about that. Not only Epstein-Barr, but a variety of viruses can induce MS. Interestingly enough, race can make a difference. Caucasians are more likely to develop, and specifically Caucasians of Northern European descent, more likely. Climate. So people that live in colder areas are more likely to get MS. But I actually think that's related to vitamin D status, which, by the way, you don't have to live in a cold region to be vitamin D deficient. We see people here in Texas vitamin D deficient. Other autoimmune diseases, gut challenges, smoking. That's going to wrap up the known list of risk factors. But here's a simple thing. We can't change our genes. And I'm going to argue we can't change our gender. You know, some people can have gender reassignment surgery, but women are still going to have XX chromosomes. Men are still going to have XY. And that means that risk is going to stay the same. But the rest of these things have to do with less than ideal lifestyle choices. And so, for instance, people in cold climates, well, is that a bad lifestyle choice? Well, not making sure you get adequate vitamin D is, and you can still get sunlight. You know, even tanning beds are known to enhance that production. So pretty fascinating stuff.
Just when you mentioned vitamin D, it's a hormone, right, Dr. Bob? And can you explain the pathway? How does that, because a lot of people have said to me before, you can absorb vitamin D through your fingers and all this stuff. Can you just clarify how does that process work, just while we're on that topic, because it is such an important element in our overall health?
Oh, absolutely. You know, so it starts with sunlight exposure. And so it's not a vitamin, but it is a vital compound. And you know, this last couple of years, there were several public health experts that said, hey, if you want to prevent the virus, you have 3 strategies: vitamin D, vitamin D, vitamin D. Hey, it's going to make my top 3 as well, but it's not going to be all 3. But what happens is the sun is going to strike the skin and it starts the process. And then next phase is going to be liver doing another activation of the molecule, and then kidneys the third. And if we were to look at, you know, if people don't get sunshine, are they vitamin D deficient? Well, they've actually done studies on religious groups that keep themselves covered and don't get sunlight. A much higher incidence of vitamin D deficiency and autoimmunity. There's that connection there. When people have liver problems, hey, guess what? They don't make as much vitamin D. When they have kidney problems, they don't make as much vitamin D. And so, you know, are those things that we can improve upon? Well, absolutely we can. And again, a functional approach is really, really good. You know, both of those organ systems are going to require detox. But Eric, there's a fascinating new piece of data. And I see some wonderful medical doctors on this Zoom. So first of all, God bless you for being here. How wonderful is that? But we now know that when someone gets visceral adiposity, fat abdomen, intra-abdominal, they increase liver fat. They call it fatty liver. And that actually begins to compress the blood supply to the liver. So the liver is not going to be as efficient. They now know that you can get fatty kidney, and the kidney is not going to be as efficient. Those two get the majority of blood flow at rest. And so that can actually increase high blood pressure. The body can jack up the pressure, which can be damaging to absolutely everything. But while we're on that, you can get a fatty pancreas, you can get a fatty heart. There's a lot of things that go awry. So, you know, friends don't let friends get fat. Simple rule.
Tough love. That's true. You know, let people know where they're at. Otherwise, you know, they're just going to be left falling down that slippery slope. I'm pulled, you know, I'm pulled back to what you said, because it's just marinated on me of all those studies that came up. So I have to go back. I have to address this, because this will affect me in the near future, I'm sure, fingers crossed, and everything working in our favor. But for newborns, what, if any, shots are required or recommended for a newborn? Because I know when I was growing up, it was mumps and rubella. I was definitely 1 or 2 that I was getting, but are these absolutely necessary? And I know we're on a bit of a dicey topic here.
Let's not get dicey about it. Let's give solid facts. How long has the human race been around? I'm just curious.
How long?
At least 100,000 years. How long have vaccines been around? Not very long. Now, when they started coming out with this new vaccine, I said, well, let's share a little bit about vaccine history. And smallpox was famous, and it should have been. A lot of people had smallpox problems. And what they would do to inoculate against smallpox. Now, this was before Jenner found cowpox, which was a really phenomenal discovery. If someone had smallpox, they would take a lesion on their arm or somewhere on their body. They would cut open the lesion. Then they'd take the recipient, they'd cut open a lesion, and they would blend the two fluids. So what was this person's immune system being exposed to? Maybe microbes and or immune response. And it worked about 99% of the time. Now that's the data. Now, sadly, 1% of the time people would get severe cases and sometimes they would die, or maybe the number was 98% of the time, but it was pretty doggone effective. But they didn't like that 2%. And I don't know if it was Jenner who was asked to inoculate the Queen of England, but he thought, my gosh, if I kill her, they're going to have my head. And so that was an interesting part of the history. But ultimately, they found out that milkmaids did not get smallpox, but they had a much lesser issue that they called cowpox. And he thought, well, why don't I just cut open a cowpox lesion and try that? And again, they found high level of efficacy. So what did they do? They took someone with an active infection that was actively fighting it, that probably had some type of residue of the microbe, and they traded that. And it worked. Now, what have we come to now? We put in mercury, aluminum, formaldehyde, aborted fetal stem cells, and who knows what to believe lately, but they're saying there was something called graphene oxide in maybe a recent shot. Now, I don't have a way of verifying that, even though the sources that I've seen, they seem to make it clear that that is in there. So how do we get from one to the other? Now, I'm the guy that had chickenpox parties. So when a kid in the neighborhood got chickenpox, I was the natural weirdo that said, I want those kids coming over and playing with my kids. I actually had someone come into my office with rubella, the German measles. I asked Dad, can he come home and play with my kids? He did. Whooping cough. We saw a case of whooping cough, brought them home to play with my kids. How are my kids? Epic. How are my grandkids? Epic. And here's what I encourage people. Make a decision based on wisdom, not protocol. Make it based on wisdom. And I think I can have a way. I was interviewed remotely by the Clear Lake newspaper about the vaccine decision. And I said, well, I'll give you some alternative thoughts to think about. But when we look at the death rate from infectious disease from 1900 to 2009, they have that study. There was a 75% reduction in death rate from infectious disease before antibiotics, a 91.25% reduction before widespread vaccination, and no drop since. And that was, by the way, bottomed out in the mid-1950s. And CDC data is very, very clear to show that. So now you might ask, but I'll also say the last time I shared that data, they struck it off of YouTube. They said, you're not sharing accurate information. Or it's not in line with our community policies. I went, wait a minute, do people have a right to know facts and make an informed decision? And I believe we do. I believe we do.
Thank you for clarifying that and putting that out there, because, like you said, for those reasons, you can get struck off certain platforms for saying certain things. But as Pete Cohn rightly said yesterday on our Clubhouse call, you are a truth seeker and the truth sharer with people, and letting people know how it is with no alternative agenda. Just that's how it is. Go do your own research on that. You have PubMed there, and it's there for all of us to ask those questions. What is serving me? What is serving my family? Rather than just putting the head down and saying, okay, yeah, absolutely, let's follow the crowd. Let's do what everyone else is doing without, full awareness and knowledge of actually what's
Eric, I want to
truly
piggyback.
holistic.
I want to piggyback on that real quick. If you want the results the crowd is getting, you might want to do what the crowd does. But the crowd has chronic illness, and chronic illness costs the world an estimated $47 trillion a year. Now, if you follow the crowd in this part of the world, we represent 4.4% of the world's population, but use over 50% of the world's prescription drugs. And you know what? Something doesn't seem right about that. Something does not seem right about that.
Yeah, when you said that last week, 50% of the world consumption of pharmaceutical medications, that's
prescription. When they include over the counter, they estimate 75%.
Yeah, that is a pandemic in itself.
Could be. Certainly the
Yeah,
opioids are. Yeah.
for sure. Just when it comes to protocol, then with traditional medicine versus functional medicine, when it comes to MS, what's it? I know you mentioned your mum a number of years back was diagnosed with MS, and corticoid steroids was the go-to. Has that come on in traditional medicine approach, and how does that differ to functional medicine and what you would take a typical MS patient through in your clinic?
You know, they might have some more higher level immunomodulatory drugs, but when you start looking at the long stream issues, if they're new, what do they know long term? They really don't. Corticosteroids, they knew long term it was a problem. Whenever they use anything that's immunosuppressive, long term is severe infection or possibly even cancer or maybe both. And so medicine is ever evolving, and we're grateful for that. But does it actually get after cause and effect? And how fascinating that they called out a 32x increase for people that have had Epstein-Barr infection. I mean, that's Harvard. That's a pretty high level increase. Did I show the language of that 32x? Did I show that PubMed study? I think I did. If not, I'll share it again.
I think you did earlier. Yeah.
So yeah, there we have it. So, and then 95% of the population is infected. Hey, that's not a small indicator, but do we have natural antivirals? And the answer is, of course we do. Do we have pharmaceutical antivirals? We do. Interestingly enough, if you look at, and one of my mentors calls this Saint Corona, because he says people are going to learn a lot, learn a lot about a lot, and hope they learned a lot about themselves. But interestingly enough, you seek, you'll find, or if you keep seeking, you'll keep finding. There's some pretty powerful antivirals that are pharmaceutical that aren't getting much press except negative press. But the strongest ones are going to be natural. We've talked about reishi, we've talked about vitamin D, we've talked about zinc, we've talked about quercetin, we've talked about colostrum. And world-renowned immunologists, those are in the protocol that I created. But each one of those things, I had a patient whose wife was in the hospital and she was slipping downhill. He said, Dr. Bob, she's not responding with medicine. Would you do a consult with the doctor? I said, if he'll talk to me, I'll talk to him. I went right to PubMed, had 5 different windows open so we didn't have to go through the search. Look at what this says, look what this says, look what this says, look what this says, look what this says. Instead of her going on a ventilator, which was the direction she was going, she went home, 2 days later and had a full and beautiful recovery. So, and how wonderful that he was open-minded enough to listen. So, maybe that's happening more and more. I don't know. But I was grateful for that. And so was her husband. And so was the patient.
For sure. Absolutely. It's great to see a MD that just goes, okay, I see data. It makes sense. Let's look at this, rather than the boundary comes up and says, no, if it's not in the book, then it's not on the cards. So that's really important to really identify that when it comes to MS in particular in your clinic. Dr. Bob, I'm sure you've had many patients who've had less than optimal results with the traditional medicine approach, have come to you out of desperation. Can you share any stories or situations that has arisen in your clinic?
Yeah, and I even have them on my YouTube channel, and we don't want to make any health claim, but here's what the patient would say. I was struggling, I was going downhill, I was losing the ability to even pick up my glasses. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to play with my kids. And I mean, as fast as 10 days, they say the numbness is gone. I've got my dexterity back. My gait is normalized. How is this possible? And I've got more than one that are there, and certainly, a bunch that are autoimmune related, where the person started making healthier choices, and somehow, some way, their body put that circumstance in remission. And in some cases, it's been in remission for decades, and that's always beautiful to see. But here's the full deal. I certainly don't have all the answers. I don't know that the best answers are purely natural. Probably a good blend of the right pharmaceutical in the right dose in the right circumstance, monitored in the right way, could be profoundly beneficial. But is that common practice? Well, in my experience, it's not. I'm not seeing it in my clinic, but maybe it's going to become more common. But keep in mind, right, as a natural medicine center, people come to me when medicine has failed as a general rule.
And right they are to seek out other approaches, getting that second opinion, which in some cases should have been the first. But you mentioned about medicinal mushrooms at the start of the call. We love reishi or Ganoderma. It's the world's top superfood. I've been enjoying this now for going on 8 years. I've had such a sense of clarity and calmness and focus that I hadn't had before, as it was a struggle of mine. And the data on this just blew my mind when it comes to the immune system, when it comes to overall health and performance and brain function. Can you touch on why medicinal mushrooms like reishi or ganoderma and cordyceps are powerful for the immune system, and in turn could really be an impactful shift for someone who's struggling with something like MS?
Well, one of the first things I want to clarify is when we say it's powerful for the immune system, most people hear that as it picks up immune function, and they might think that's a contraindication when it comes to autoimmunity, because the medical model is there's an over response, there's an over attack, even though the literature says cell injury precedes autoimmune disease. And look at this Epstein-Barr connection. It's an infected cell. That's why the immune system is working to take care of it and get rid of it. But going back to this, what you mentioned are immune modulators. And so if we were to get more technical about it, our immune system balances, it's got something called Th1 and Th2 signaling. And amazingly enough, reishi, if Th2 is too strong, it can actually influence Th1 and create balance. If Th1 is too strong, it can influence Th1 and create balance. Balance is the key. And so as an immune modulator, which is a documented medical benefit, and it's very clear in PubMed, it can calm down allergy, it can calm down autoimmunity, it can upregulate the body's fight against infection, it can upregulate the body's fight against cancer. And I'm going to argue that it can do it all simultaneously, because I've seen people, calm down cancer or autoimmunity while simultaneously clear out infection and their allergies go away. So balance is really the key. And there's such a beautiful blend of nutrients. Now, if we go specifically to reishi ganoderma, the top superfood on the planet, it's got all the fabulous 50, all the vitamins, minerals, amino acids, proteins, carbohydrates, fat, fiber, and water in doses that make a difference to human health. 430 unique molecules, 79 of which are directly antimicrobial. And then which balance of those 430 are immunomodulatory? Well, I don't really know. But the pharmaceutical research is trying to find that. They want to know, what's the one molecule in ganoderma? I say, why would you look for the one when you know the whole thing works? But I guess that's the nature of pharmaceutical research, right? If they can isolate a molecule, they can patent it. By the way, they have to tweak it because they can't patent a natural molecule. Then they have a blockbuster. But we haven't seen many blockbusters lately, have we? But we are seeing that natural products are now getting a surge of press. So maybe it is St. Corona.
I like that, St. Corona. Yeah, it is an opportunity for everyone to really learn, I think, and see things differently, and really maybe approach life a little bit differently, So there's always good in everything, isn't that right?
Well, we have the law of polarity, so both good and bad.
Yes, absolutely. So just to wrap up my last question, Dr. Bob, when it comes to nutritional protocols for someone who presents with an immune challenge like MS, what are some of the things that you would be recommending? Now, I know everyone is different, and you said sometimes there's a more of a complex blend of pharmaceuticals with natural protocols, but what are some of your go-tos for someone who may be struggling with MS that you could go, okay, we need to cross the T's and dot the I's, as you would say, to bring their vitality levels up? What would they be?
Well, there's some universal immune modulators. So we want to seal and heal the gut. 80% of the immune system's clustered around the gut. Then we've got DHEA, which is an adrenal molecule that can become either sex steroids or aldosterone or stay as DHEA, or, there's a lot of different things that DHEA can do, but it's an immune modulator. So is ganoderma, also known as reishi. So is periliseed. So are activated omega-3s, the omega-3s with resolvins. And so is vitamin D. When you start looking at MS, there's some onesie-twosie things like B12 is known to be pretty important for multiple sclerosis patients. Then we can just keep looking. And, would we want to do a probiotic? Well, probably. Would we want to do maybe more antivirals in this case? I see, by the way, one of my mentors said this years ago, when it comes to viruses and toxins, it's not us against them, it's us with them. So if you use something classic like fever blisters, which is another herpes virus like Epstein-Barr, that can be a barometer for how well you're taking care of yourself. If people are suddenly getting a fever blister outcome, they know they're either not sleeping right, eating right. Well, we can go with all of them, right? Eat right, drink right, think right, move right, sleep right, poop right, talk right. their own personal choices to keep their immune system strong, something is broken down. And the solution is whatever broke down, stop doing that. Whatever makes it better, do more of that.
For myself, my own experience, I can only ever speak from my own experience or share someone else's that's really in a position of authority like yourself, Dr. Bob. But from my own experience, I've found reishi or Ganoderma in coffee and tea a beautiful complement that would adapt to people's lifestyle quite easily, that doesn't require a huge amount of change. As you mentioned, you listed a number of supplementations there that people may need to get a specialized recommendation for if they're getting it from a clinical practitioner like yourself, or may get lost on the web understanding what's of good quality. But I would love to just highlight how easy it is to enjoy the benefits of reishi through what our company and partners have done, infusing it in coffee and tea. How powerful is that, do you feel, for the habitual human to wake up on a daily basis and to just boil the kettle and know that they're getting a therapeutic dose of the world's top superfood without having to really think about it?
It's my top clinical intervention. And I use the bridge from Zig Ziglar, my favorite all-time speaker, but he struggled in his first 10 years. He said the change in his speaking success was when he learned to tell people what they needed to hear in a way they wanted to hear it. So how about giving people the nutrition they need in a way that they want to consume it? When people drink coffee, they never need to be reminded. They never plan to quit. In fact, most of them you couldn't pay to quit. And now we take that habit and we make it profoundly healthy, and we've got some fun testimonials all over the world where just because the way the world runs, someone can't say that this resolved any circumstance in their body, but they could say, the only thing I did differently was start drinking this coffee, and this went away and that went away, and I lost 30 pounds, and now I'm happier and I'm sleeping better, and you name it. So people can say those things. And isn't it interesting that we live in a world that if you want to, say that a natural product did anything, you can be fined. There's lots of problems that can happen. So why would that be? But maybe St. Corona will help fix that too. Maybe.
Maybe indeed. Guys, if you have any questions in regards to our conversation here this evening or this afternoon, depending on what part of the world you are in, of course, let us know in the chat if you have any specific MS related questions. Saturday, we'll be having a conversation around our business and how we're sharing this in a digital world to increase your own vitality, your friends and networks vitality, and also potentially your bank account if it's a fit for you. And next week, we will be looking at a holistic approach to diabetes. So just letting you guys know in advance.
Claudia, you got a nice compliant question for us.
Not a question actually, but it's funny because I had an event this Sunday, and it's when I'm at the event, I sample coffee or I sell coffee, and I said, you just got into the event, walk around, it'll take you probably about 15 or 30 minutes to feel the difference in the coffee, and normally they'll come back, feeling quite positive. So my next question to them, just like Dr. Bob says, have you ever thought of, quitting drinking coffee? Excuse me? Because that is a serious question. I go, no. So, they inquire a little bit more. I share, a few testimonials. And I almost want to tap myself on the shoulder, but I got 6 brand new business partners this weekend in 6 hours. So, and you know what? Just listening more, listening with intent. I'm not going hunting, but I'm fishing. I'm just listening, setting them up, to unload the information, unload to where they are. So had an epic Sunday. So you know what? I just thought I wanted to share the gold nuggets with you guys.
Well, thank you for making our wonderful world better. And you know what? I'm pretty sure that this is something that almost anybody can do. Would I say anybody? Someone will come up with someone who can't, but almost anybody can do this. If you can share a cup of coffee and let the coffee work its magic, or really the reishi within the coffee work its magic. Powerful stuff. Great share, Claudio. Thank you. Well done, my friend. Proud of you.
Awesome job, Claudio. So keep doing what you're doing. Bring them onto the calls next week, perhaps as well, Claudio. Would be great to help educate those people on diabetes as well. Maybe they know some people who have struggled with that also. So that is the end of our call. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on Instagram and on Zoom. Like I mentioned, we will be touching base on diabetes next week. Dr. Bob, thank you once again for joining us with this for this conversation today. Some great learning as always. So have an amazing rest of your day, guys, and we will see you either Saturday for our business chat or the following Tuesday for a chat around diabetes. So thank you all. I will pass over to you to wrap up the call from there, Dr. Bob.
Well, I like to wrap up with 4 questions. We'll be quick about them. First question is why? Why'd you take the time to join us today when there's so many other things you could do? Second question is the answer to the first. Why not? We're going to look at information that maybe the world needs to see from people that are utilizing it effectively. Third question is why not you? Someone's going to say, I'm going to make better choices, and I want to try some of that reishi infused coffee. And here's the final question. Why not now? The longer you wait to act on information, the least likely you are. So if you're watching this live, get back to whoever referred you. If you're watching a replay, get back to whoever referred you. And we'd love to welcome you to our Reishi Organoderma family, and let's make the world better. So good night if you're in that part of the world. Good day if you're in this part of the world. And God bless all everywhere.